Hello and welcome to the webinar. Just as people join, just to let you know that you're in listen only mode. So if you have any questions at all, please pop them in the comment box and I will do my best to answer them for you. If you have any questions, that's fine, let me know. We're going to be talking about increasing our contract tendering success rate today, but also about why that helps us to grow our business. And it's really exciting opportunities out there. So hopefully there'll be some great hints and tips for you. So just as people are joining, I'll start sharing, getting the presentation up ready for you. Okay, so let's make a start. As I said, my name is Debbie Clement-Large and I am here to talk about increasing your contract tendering success rate. Now, my business is Why Follow the Herd and I'm a business empowerment coach. So I work with entrepreneurs in corporations and organizations, and I work with entrepreneurs in their own businesses. And I'm all about affecting positive change in their both in their lives and in their businesses. It's about, whether we think we can do something or whether we think we can't, either way we're right. And that is such a great quote because it talks about, everything is what we think in our minds, and that impacts on all aspects of our lives, but also, in business as well, in having those skills and the confidence and the belief to be able to put things into operation. And I work as a coach, which is different to training, because the training is great and you can learn some great skills from training and, you can put them to scenarios in the training session itself. But coaching is actually then helping you to implement that into your business itself. And you get your return on investment when you do actually implement the changes and implement new behaviors, new information. So that's what a business coach is, and that's where I work. So I work with individuals in corporations and entrepreneurs as well, all around the world at the moment. So that's fantastic. So it's really good to see so many of you here today. And so let's have a look. So we're going to be looking at small organizations. So when an organization starts out, it's interested in wanting to start, things are slow, it's your stumbling blocks, you're feeling your feet, you're finding a way, you're learning as you go along, and it's interesting. And you take on lots of information, you do ingest that, and that could be from courses, from coaches, from just information anywhere, from other people. And it's about learning how we grow, because ultimately what you want as a new business or a small organization is to reach the place where your dreams are becoming true, so growing into the place where you can fly off into the world almost. You're reaching your goals and your objectives, and that's an exciting place to be. And there are a couple of ways that we can look to be doing and reaching our true potential and reaching what our dreams are saying that we want to become as a business. And even personally, it could be that we're after promotion within our organization, or it could be just growing your own business. So the question really I want to ask you is, where are you heading? Do you know the direction in which you're traveling? Or have you just let yourself or let your business drift along? And that happens so often. It's so frequent in that, situations and events happen to us. And we find that where we had a goal from go to A to B, we actually end up somewhere at C. And there could be all sorts of reasons for that. Maybe we've taken new opportunities on board, or maybe we've just let things happen to us. And it's about taking ownership and being responsible for things. And I love that saying, being responsible, because it's being, you have the ability to be responsible and take your whatever response you want to a situation. And what we really want in a business and in our lives is the lazy river. We want an easy ride. We want to coast along and achieving our dreams. And, that's a fantastic concept and thing that we want. But life kind of isn't like that, really. And sometimes it just feels we're on a bit of a roller coaster ride. And sometimes that can be an exciting roller coaster ride. And sometimes it's scary. We don't know where we're going. But growing your business shouldn't feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's always opportunities. There's people you can speak to, people like myself, because if you're an entrepreneur and you have staff, knowing what to do next and sharing your fears, and we all have fears. You're certainly not alone in that. And growing a business stretches you out of your personal comfort zone. And it's knowing that it's okay to feel that fear, that it's okay to feel stretched, because that's where really innovative and creative and great things happen. And really, really successful people feel that fear as well. They just don't let it hold them back. So as you go forward, how do you prepare to grow? Whatever size business or team, or whatever the operations that you have at the moment, if you're wanting to expand what you do or just to learn and develop yourself, how do you go about doing that? And there are different stages and there are different processes that you can take. And we can have organic growth or we can have planned growth. Now, if you are a business already, then you could look at acquiring or merging with another business. And that's a planned way to grow. But organic growth is to do with can be to do with contracting. So you can take on contracts that will help you generate more turnover. Maybe you can take on more staff, a bigger range of business offers that you can supply to your customers. So this is a great way of organically growing your business. And this is what we're going to be focusing on today in the webinar. So when you are thinking of taking on a contract, there are some really important things that you need to think about. Will the contract you're looking at fit in with your strategy? Now, you have a mission and you have your set of objectives and you have your strategy and your tactics as well. But whatever you take on should really be in line with that. You don't want to be going off piste at all, because that could end up costing you money. It could, might not help your reputation. You might not be able to give the great customer service. It's all about your core business, what is true and what is right for you. Also, putting a tender together costs you money to put a bid. So how much is this going to cost you, and have you got the resources available to do it? Do you have the technical skill and the experience within your business to be able to match the requirements of what the contract is asking for? Because if you haven't, then there really isn't the point putting in this contract. And I think the last 2 points on there are really key. If you're taking on, say you're wanting to grow and you're taking on a large contract, fulfilling a contract is obviously the one thing, but how will that affect the other work that you're doing for other businesses or for other people? Will that affect the quality, the customer service, or the quality of the service or the product that you're able to offer other people? And it's also important to think about how key is that customer that you're wanting to contract with? How important is it to your business? And we've got some other key considerations as well. That all commissioners are wanting better outcomes for their money. Now, if you're thinking about wanting to contract with a public sector body, and an awful lot of businesses do, because they're really good payers, there are, you get a 3-year contract, and, that contract will be seen out for those 3 years. There's very little circumstances where that contract would be pulled from you. They also are really keen to make sure that small businesses are paid on time. And the time issue is a really important thing for lots of small entrepreneurs as well. So it's a good way to be able to contract with the public body. But as you're aware, public funding is decreasing, which means we could end up with situations where there's a lot of competition for a contract. And because of that, profit margins could be shrinking. And now I'm a trained chartered management accountant, and I'm a qualified business analyst as well. And I've worked and seen tenders. We're going to be looking at the financial element of tenders. And we've been having a look and analysing tender bids and documentation for a very long time. And I have seen on numerous occasions organisations putting in bids or saying wanting to contract for work that they really can't afford to do. They're putting themselves at a loss even, and I've seen organisations almost go out of business because of that. So it's really, really key to think about. Not only is the contract in line with your mission? But also, is it a price that you can afford as an organisation? Don't put yourself in financial difficulty because of a contract. But it's also really important that you don't hide your head in the sand for any of these considerations. Really think carefully about what you're doing. It might seem great and an easy way to grow, but they do have their considerations, their implications and pluses and advantages and disadvantages for taking on contracts. So really think every aspect through. Now we're going to be in this webinar looking at 6 key areas. These are the areas that people had the most difficulty in getting right and understanding. So this is why I'm going to go through these aspects. So we're going to look at operating efficiently and effectively. We'll look at pricing strategy, dealing with overheads, profit, the financial analysis of your accounts, and social value. And all this is about the transformation from going from where you are now to where you want to be. So starting off with looking at operating efficiently and effectively. Now, this is really irrespective of whether you're going for a contract or not, because it is really important that you know that you're operating efficiently and effectively, because if you're not, you could be spending out costs on things that you don't need to be, and also spending a lot of time on things that you don't need to be. When I've been in and spoken to small teams and I've sat and observed people doing their jobs, just to get an idea of where they're coming from and what they're doing, there's been more than one occasion, it's been several occasions where people have said to me, oh, I do this because this is what I got shown to do when I started working here. And that's really interesting. And then you say, well, how long have you worked here? And they'll say, oh, well, I've been here 10 years. Now, the interesting thing is that process or that activity or that task was probably the right thing to put in 10 years ago. But things have changed such a lot in 10 years. We've got technologies moved on. We've got the Amazon effect now. People have certain expectations on the way they can order things, on the way that they're treated as customers, the way they pay for things. And it means, you need to keep up with the times. You need to be understanding that every year that you're actually looking at your business, you're looking at what you're doing. You're looking at how you're operating. Are you changing the way you're storing, you're taking information, the way you're performing tasks in line with expectations, not only of your customer, but in line with new technology that might be available to you? And the best way to understand what people within your business are doing or within your team is by observing them. If your team is a bit of a dispersed unit and you have people on different sites, then maybe a survey is a good way to do it. Obviously, you have to pre-populate the questions on this. You need to think really carefully about how those questions will be interpreted, what sort of responses you want. But the downside of surveys that you really need to think about is that it's often the people that are disgruntled or the people that are extremely happy that supply responses to surveys. So, the vast majority of people in the middle that are sort of happy with a service, don't always bother. So you might get a skewed response and a skewed view. And the other thing to think about is when you do a survey, especially if you do a customer survey and you get the information in and you analyse it, do you actually do anything about what the survey says? If people are unhappy with one element of your customer dealings with customers, then is it something you're going to change? Are you going to make any implement any new processes and procedures on the back of what your survey says? Because that's important to do. If you're getting that really gold standard information and your customers are telling you what they want to see is delivered as their product or service, so really you've got to act on that basis, because that is absolutely key. Now, another way you can find out how you're operating is by interviewing your team, interviewing your staff individually, and that's really useful. But what that is really useful in doing means that, unlike a survey, you can tailor your questions per the conversation, which is great, but you tend to find that you get a lot of explicit knowledge from the person. Because we've got two types of knowledge. We've got explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. Now, the explicit knowledge is the information that is included in things like their job descriptions, their how-to guides, flow diagrams, anything that explains what they have to do is part of their job. But tacit knowledge is that interesting knowledge which is a bit like your known unknowns. So you just do things because that's what your experience has taught you to do over time. But you don't necessarily know why you do it, and it's not necessarily documented anywhere. But it's things like you might have a certain relationship with different types of customers. But it's all that type of information that you wouldn't necessarily think about telling somebody unless they saw you doing it and then they asked you about it. So that's why observation is a really good way to capture information. You could also have a workshop. You could get people together in a room. You could talk about through your processes, what you do, whether there's issues in the way you're working, if you've got a whole process in taking an order, which goes from a salesperson to your finance and or accounts section, right through to your customer service and your product packing and sending out, and all those types of the shipping, then it's good to know whether there's issues between parts. If somebody's on holiday, does an order form sit in a tray somewhere? Does it get stuck on a system somewhere? And having those conversations between teams, between departments or between staff can actually get a good consensus on whether a process is working or whether further work needs to be looked at it. And then lastly is the documents. Do you ever look at your documents? And I don't mean just physical documents, I mean your online documents as well. Do you analyse the information that you're asking from your customers or the information you're gathering? Is it still appropriate? Do you need to be asking for different information now? And how are you storing that information? Is it secure? Are you still storing it on your service? Is that costly? Or do you have cloud-based? Is that how you're storing your information? So it's about every year you should have a look at these, because if you're not doing things efficiently and you're not working at everything you're doing adding value to your customer, then that's costing you money. So the next thing we're going to look at is your pricing strategy. Now, when you're going for a contract, you could either be asked to supply a price within a bracket. So it could be, we want somebody to tender for a contract to supply 1,000 widgets. And how much does that cost? We would expect to pay between £50,000 and £60,000. So then you will put your price in that bracket and submit that. Or you might be said, they might come and say, we want to pay £50,000 for widgets. How many can you supply? So it'll be a fixed price, but it also could be a service as well. So, you've got to think then, which element of the price bracket do you put in? Is that to do with quality of what you're able to offer? Or if it's a fixed price, how do you compare with that? But one really, really major consideration you need to think about, and I can't stress it too strongly, is 2p. If the contract attracts 2p anywhere, which is where employees will transfer into your business or your team as part of the contract, then you really need to consider the cost to your organization. Because if you're talking about contracting with a local authority, then you might have local authority staff coming across to you, but that could apply to anyone in the public sector. And you might need to think about pension and what that means for you. Is it going to be cost effective taking on staff maybe where they have a particularly good pension? Is it going to price you out of being able to afford to run that contract? So that is a really, really key consideration. And I would certainly advise you to take legal advice over that, because that could really make your decision that actually that contract isn't worth going because of the cost of the 2p. Also, there's lots of problems about large versus small organisations if they're competing for the same contract. Now, they both have advantages and disadvantages. So just because you're a small organisation or a small business doesn't mean to say that you should be put off for putting in for bigger contracts. Now, a small organisation, they might not have access to all the resources that a large organisation would have. They might not have special legal advice on tap. They might not have their HR, special HR advice available whenever they want, or same with finance. They might not have reserves either to, but what a small organisation does, and what it does is being to be able to change, working to adapt itself to meet customers, more flexible and adaptable and agile than a large organisation. Large organisations tend to have a lot of red tape to tiers of management or layered structure of staffing in their organisation, and many more meetings and approval processes that things have to go through that small organisations don't. But the advantage of a large organisation is, though, that it might have more reserves financially to be able to put in a lower price, and also they can have greater access to resources. They might have their own in-house HR, they might have their own in-house finance and in-house legal teams that they can get expertise available whenever they want it. But whatever size organisation you are, just find your strengths, find your value of what you can add, and it shouldn't stop you going for any type of contract. Now, one of the pricing strategy things you need to think about is competition. How well do you know your competition? Do you know what the quality and what the price of your competition, of their product or service? Do you know what they're offering? You know what their customer service is like, what their reputation is like? That doesn't mean that you should try and emulate them, because you shouldn't. You can never emulate or copy another organisation the way it works, because you just can't. You need to be creative with your own business. You need to think about the way that you're working and look at everything you're doing is adding value, but also understanding how you fit in. So if your price for your product is slightly more expensive than your competitors, think about why that is. What added value are you adding in? Do you have a special, better quality product? Is it better components in there? Is it something that will last longer? Do you have better customer support? Do you have, worldwide access to things, that's will enable your customers to feel that the benefit of paying for that is better? It's all about where you sit and where you think you can add, because you might all be competing for the same slither of leaf, but there's no reason, whether you're cheaper or whether you're more expensive, that you can't stand out from everybody else. Okay, it's just showing what you can do and what you can bring to the table is part of that contract. So when you've put together your contract and you've decided that it's the right thing for you, your tender, and you think it's the right thing for you, and you've looked at the finance figures, you've put together your costs. Now, if there's a service that you're putting in for, please make sure you analyse your tender calculations. Now, that might seem like a really obvious thing to do, but there has been so many times when I've seen incorrect calculations, things not adding up, not making sense. And when you start finding problems or issues on things like this in the financial documentation, you start digging. And if you find one mistake, you think there might be some more. So if things look really good on the surface, you're less likely to dig deeper and to start asking questions about things. So really get the calculations right. Staffing, if you're being asked to cost out staffing over a number of years, so if your contract is 3 years with the ability to extend another 2, then you need to put the 5 years worth of prices on there. But if you understand, if you're pricing an inflationary award every year for your staff, then you need to think that, is it appropriate, or is it at a level that's ever going to be challenged? If you're putting a really high percentage each year and upping it, and you need sort of up 5, 6, 7%, then expect a challenge, because it's got to be in line with what the market would be paying, what the market would expect. Now, the next one, level of training. Now, we talked a little bit about training. Now, training is great because it's a great way to learn new things. But what's really important and what gives you your return on investment is the implementation within your team, within your business. So The level of training on an organisation that the organisation invests is normally a good indicator of how well the staff are looked after. It also gives an indication of the turnover with the staff within your team, within your organisation, because what you don't want is having a high turnover of staff, and then maybe your team, your product, your service might suffer a little bit in terms of the quality of either the service or goods going out or the customer support. What they like to see is that actually you are interested in investing in yourself and in your business, because your staff are the best asset that you can have. So you should want to invest in them, and you should want to not only give them the skills and the ability, but the support to be able to implement that into day-to-day business. Things like mileage rates, if they're in line with HMRC, that's great. If you're charging really high or paying really high mileage rates to your staff, why are you doing that? That might be something that might be challenged. And they'll also be interested in what other costs you're putting in. Is there anything else you're doing with your organisation that you're wanting to charge? And, that might bring some queries or questions about what are you putting in on this contract. And the last thing really, is understanding your direct, variable and non-variable costs. So we've got an example here of your direct costs, and there's two ways that you can look at setting your price. Now, there are lots of other ways to do it, but just for this example on this webinar, we're looking at two ways. So the first way on the left, we're thinking about manufacturing 500 units of a new product. So we have our fixed costs. Now, the fixed cost won't change irrespective of how many products you produce. So if you produce one product or 1,000 or 1,000,000 products, that will still come to £10,000. So in this example, we've got product development and product variable cost. Now, these do fluctuate in line with producing 500 or you're producing 1,000 or 1,000,000. Those costs will obviously, you'll need more labour to produce and more materials to make £1,000. So your total costs are £15,000. So your cost per unit is the £15,000 divided by the number of units you're going to make. So that's £30. The way that most people think about costing. But you've got to have a think, £30. That's just your cost. By the time you add your profit on the top of that, and does that make you competitive with other people? So if your competitors, theirs only cost £25, yours is £30. What value? Why would they want to purchase from you? Were premium niche product, or are you sort of lower down in the chain you wanting to do? So think about your position and where you that's competitive. Now the example on the right is the way around. So you look at the market and you're saying, I want to do a product. Now I've had a look at the market, and we're selling that product around about £30 to £40. We reckon that we could hit range at 35. Okay, so let's have a look. So to make that product, one unit, we're talking about our variable costs, which are our labour and our parts and materials. So if we're going to sell it at 35, taking off our variable costs, that gives £25 left. And that's because we know that's going to stay constant through the year. Now our fixed costs are £10,000. That £10,000 and divide it by 25, that tells us that we have to make and sell 400 units to break even. Anything beyond that gives us a profit. It's a useful way, because starting with your pricing point first, products that you actually need to be, anything beyond that is great. So that gives you a couple of ideas about pricing. I'm going to have a look at overheads. Now this is an area that so many people struggle. So if you feel like that's great, well, to say, you know, how you can treat, how you can look at apportioning your overheads. You need to know, to start off, you need to know the value of your overheads. Do they cost? Contracts in place, how much of those overhead charges are you already costing out the other contracts? Because whoever's commission, they're not paying for overheads that you, what they don't duplicate. So you have fixed pounds and you have 10 contracts in place already, and you're going for contract 11. So in your current contracts, each of your contracts is charged £10,000 towards your overheads. So when you get to contract 11, what do you put as your overheads? And that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if you put £10,000 against that, it means you're recovering £110,000 worth back from your overheads. And commissioners can find out this information. They have a lot of information at their fingertips, and they don't like knowing that applicating up on overheads. So just to be aware of that fact. Now, I often saw a lot of blanket rates put down. So overheads, how are you, the question that I would put is, you know, what are the overheads, how much, and how is this being, how is this figure being arrived at? And sometimes they would just put, we just charge 10% on each contract. And if it seemed like a high percent, then I would query it. Well, how have you made that up? Justify you charging all this overhead to that contract? And very often they couldn't. And that would raise a risk, and I wouldn't be happy with that. So there are ways that you can actually apportion it properly. So if you are asked what your overheads are, then we can show them straight away, you know, this is how we've made these up. And commissioners will be a lot happier with that. So here are a few bases that you can use for apportioning overheads. You can use per IT user, per the number of orders, per the number of referrals. You know, there are other options as well, per square foot of a building, you know, all sorts of things. But as long as you can demonstrate what you're doing is fair, that's fine. So let's work through a little bit of an example here. Now on top left box, we've got total overheads for the whole organisation. So this is your organisation. So finance costs you £100,000 a year. HR costs you 80,000, IT 50,000, and so on. So you overall you're £425,000 in overheads in a year. Now at the top right box, the total stats for a year are you already have contracts. So your total contract value that you already have is £1 million. The number of full-time equivalents you have are 150 staff. A number of IT users within that are 135. And the total number of orders and referrals per year are 5,000. Now, so that's your organisation information. So now just looking for the contract itself that we're putting in for now, we're tendering for, is worth £300,000. And the number of full-time equivalents that you have, out of your 150, you'll need 45 of those to be able to support this contract. And of which 40 of those are IT users. And you reckon that contract will generate you orders or referrals of 1,700 per year. So the box at the bottom shows, we'll start off with finance. So finance have total overheads of 100. Now I've used the total contract value for finance as a way of apportioning. So I've taken the total overheads for finance, divided it by the total contract value that we have, and then times that by the contract value we're going for now, which is the 300,000. So that gives us £30,000 worth of the 100,000 finance costs that we should apportion to that new contract. Now the same for HR. I've taken the £80,000 for HR. I've divided it by the total number of full-time equivalents you have, which is 150, and then times that answer by the number of full-time equivalents that will be servicing that contract, and that is 45. So that gives you £24,000 to apportion to the contract. Now IT, I've done it based on the number of IT users. Legal, I've based it on the total contract value. Accommodation costs, I've based it on the number of full-time equivalents, but you could use something like square meterage of floor space. So you could say the people working on that new contract will take up 100 square meters or whatever of your building space, and therefore apportion it on that basis. I've done it on basis of full-time equivalents. This is just subjective, so I think as long as you've got a rationale for what you've done, that's fine. And other central services, say if you have a reception or something else that you get charged for, but you can't apportion out to a contract, I've done it on the basis of number of orders and referrals per year on our example there. But if you have a look, what's interesting, this is just random numbers for our example purposes. But if you were really wanting to apportion £127,915 to that contract of 300,000, I think the commissioners would laugh you out the door, really, wouldn't they? They wouldn't really expect more than about, I don't know, it really depends on the contract, but if you were around the 30,000 mark, that would probably be okay, 10%. So really that's just for an illustrative purpose. So I hope that's given you an idea that actually this is the proper way to be able to apportion and actually justify what your overheads are. We move on to have a look at profit. Now profit's interesting. If you're a private business, then that's great. You want profit. That's the whole reason why you're operating. But if you're in the not-for-profit sector, profit's a bit of a dirty word. So you want to be looking at retained funds or resources. But a lot of not-for-profit organisations, and if you're working for one or you have a community interest company, they often think that actually they shouldn't be building an element of profit in. And I'm here to say that yes, you should. You need profit as a buffer. It's really, really important. What happens if you have an unexpected cost come up against your contract? You can only plan in and foresee so much against, your contract and what you think it's going to cost you to run. You never know what's going to happen around the door. But also you need to think about reinvesting back in your business. All businesses and organisations need reinvestment back in, they need future technology, they need changes, they might need improvements to the business infrastructure, their buildings, any machinery, any vehicles, things like that. So you need to be reinvesting back. You want to call it profit or whether you want to call it retained funds, that's fine. It's all sort of one and the same thing really, but you really do need to put that on. And you think that would be obvious, but for some businesses, actually, I've seen them definitely put a zero. And when they put zero profit in there, that indicates a red flag for me. And that's a definite warning that they're a slightly more riskier organisation because you need that buffer. But that comes back to the question of how much profit is acceptable. And I bring you back to the picture that says, well, it depends what your competitors are doing. And I've been asked quite a few times, is it all right to put 5% profit or 7% profit or 10% profit? And the answer is, well, it depends on the size of your contract. It depends what you're doing and how on earth does that price you compared to your competitors. You can't just have a blanket figure. You need to be thinking about what does that really mean for you as a business, and do you want the work? If it's all going to go on pricing, are you going to make you expensive? Is it going to make you cheap? Can you up your profit? But it's understanding what that market is around you and how it's operating is important. But you mustn't just think about the immediate market around you. So if you're operating in town Ample, you could have an organisation in town B down the road that sees town A as a really good place to trade. And it's seen that contract contract and it wants an opportunity to break into the market of town A. So it might put a really low price in. So you must look wider. You must understand what's available, who's around, and how whatever profit you put into your organisation will make you competitive. But it's also about having enough to sustain you going forward as an organisation as well. And it's getting that balance right. Now, then point 5 that we're going to look at is your financial appraisal of your accounts. And I can see it now, eyes glazing over. Oh my God, we're talking about accounts. Please, please. You know, we're just going to look through this quickly. And it's important that you understand that, because if you get asked for your set of accounts, it means you're in the running for the contract. It's usually only the last few, 3 maybe businesses, organisations that get asked to supply their financial accounts. But it's really important that you know what they're looking at when they go through them. Not that you can change them, because you can't. And you can't change the figures in your sets of accounts anyway. But it's not just the figures they look at, it's what you write into your accounts as well. So let's just have a look at that. So the first thing I would look at is the narrative. And that tells such a lot about your organisation and in the year gone by, and it tells you the plans going forward. So in the year gone by, if you're saying you didn't make the expected profit, or you didn't turn over as much as you had planned to, why didn't you? What's gone wrong? What's happened? Or it could say that you've acquired a business, or you've sold part of your business, or you've merged, or something. And all that information is really valuable to be able to assess the risk, because everything about going into a contract is about, one, can you supply it? They don't want you as a business going out of business during the period that you're contracted, especially if you're working for somebody, you know, contracting with a public sector body. And even worse if it's a statutory service, because that would be a nightmare for the organisation to be able to support. It's one thing to be able to get another stationary supplier in reasonably quickly, although that would be hugely disruptive. But if you're supplying something like a statutory service to a public body, then you know that could be a nightmare for them. So they want to make sure that you are a stable organisation. And also in the narrative, they'll be having a look at what your plans are going forward. Are you looking at, well, again, selling part of your business? Are you looking at growing? Are you looking at taking on new contracts? Are you looking at going into new markets? Are you looking at going into new locations? What are your plans, and where do you see yourself in sort of 12 months or beyond? And that gives a ton of information about what you are as an organisation, what's happened in the past. It gives information on trends of what's happened. And it's just building up this great picture of who you are as a business. And the next bit we have a look at is the ratios. Now, I'm not going to go through these in a huge amount of detail, but these are some of the things that an accountant will have a look at to see how stable you are as an organisation and what's happened in the past. So that's why they ask for 3 years, because all these calculations are subjective to a point. So it's all about getting trends about your business and what's happened within 3 years, but also how you compare with other organisations within your market, within your industry. So things like the current ratio, that'll be looking at your organisation's liquidity. How easy is it for you? How much cash do you have, and how easy is it to turn what you have into cash? So if you have an inventory or stocks or cash in the bank, or you have investments that you could sell, how easy is it? If you had a monetary problem, a liquidity problem, how easily would you be able to rectify that? Now, gearing and debt ratio, they're looking at how much that you have borrowed, how much you have in, you've had finance coming in from somewhere, how much borrowings have you got? And that creates a risk. And usually, and I say usually because there's no standard for this, but usually it's seen that up to 50% is safe to debt in terms of that ratio. But I've seen housing associations debt safely up 80 odd %. So it really depends on that industry. It also depends on your trends in the last 3 years. So if you've gone from no debt up to £500,000 of debt in 3 years, but your profit and your turnover and everything else hasn't changed, what's the purpose behind the debt? Is that debt going to keep going up and you're not going to be making any more money? Usually you get debt to be able to, either expand or buy new machinery. It's about staying in the game of what you're doing. So it's all about looking at what's happening, where you're doing. And the interest cover is a way of looking at how you can you afford to be able to pay off that debt? How easily is it for you to pay the interest that's generated from those loans that you have? Now, asset turnover and return on capital employed are profitability ratios, and they are looking at how hard you are working the assets you have to generate you money. And you want to be, the term I hear is sweating those assets. So it's about really, really using those assets to be able to get the most out of them, to be able to get the best return. And those two ratios give an indication of how well you're doing that. Now, debtor days, this is an interesting one because it's about people that owe you money as a business and how quickly you're calling that back in. So if you're starting in year 1 and it's taking you 50 days, and in year 2 it's taking you 40 days, and in year 3 it's taking you 30 days, that would be a great trend, because you'd be saying, wow, you've really got a great handle on those debtors. You're not letting the longer a debt stays, the more it is likely to turn into a bad debt. So you're recalling that money in really quickly. But if that was going in the opposite direction and it went from 30 days to 40 days to 50 days, that's a bad trend, and that would indicate that's something within your organisation would need looking at. Your processes and the way that you're calling in that debt and managing that would need to be looked at. So this, as I say, it's subjective. It's just giving you trends on how your organisation is operating, but also giving how it's operating within the industry as well. And the last is, say that you're into purchasing. Now, I've got a dog and a stick. So just for that example, just say you're purchasing the dog. That's what the contract is for. It's for the dog. But if you're offering the stick as well, that's added value. That's not what they're paying for, but it's what they're getting as a bonus, if you like, to having that contract. And that's really important. People like value these days. They like being given extra value. They like being given bonuses. They like being given content in advance. And that's all about generating that reciprocity and that authority and that social proof of who you are, but actually giving something back. People like to feel that they're getting more than they're paying for. Which is great. And that's what you need to think about as well with your contract. Now, the Social Value Act applies to if you have a contract with a local authority. But I would suggest that no matter who are you wanting to contract with, adding something extra in to the contract and showing that you can give them some extra value is a winner. It's great. People love that. So this is the proper definition of social value. So it's over and above the value of purchasing the direct goods and services or the outcomes that you're purchasing. And social value can take different forms. So we can have the footprint. Now that's there to represent your carbon footprint. So say that you have an organisation that delivers meals, and I tell you what, really good idea. I've just thought of crisps. Do you remember hula hoop crisps? They used to be in big bags. And if you buy the multi-packs, you get 6 multi-packs, and they used to be big packaging. So it made you look as though you were getting a lot of crisps, even though it was only the same volume. Then they discovered, actually, it's costing them a lot because half the bag of the multi-pack was filled with air to make it look good. But then they couldn't fit so many packs of the crisps in boxes, which meant instead of having 1 lorry, they might have to have a lorry and a half, which wasn't great, it costing them money, and also, wasn't good for the old carbon footprint. So they decided to take the stance of saying, okay, we're going to reduce the size of our multi-packs. We're going to cram our 6 bags in, but retaining the quality of the crisps because we don't want to crush them, so that the multi-pack doesn't have all the air in it. And actually we can pack more of those multi-packs into boxes. We now only need 1 truck. So it's saving us money. It's helping the environment. Everyone's a winner. People love it. It's great marketing bit. Look at that. We're not charging you extra. We're actually saving money. And you're getting the same great quality crisps. They're in a smaller packaging, so they're better for you as the consumer to be able to take home. Doesn't fill up so much space in your bags. So that's great. The top right one is about apprentices. So you could, as an organisation, think about taking on apprentices. For young people, it's not always easy getting their first foot into a job. So, having an opportunity or giving an opportunity to apprentices is a really great way of adding social value, because it's helping the community, but also giving them the skills. You can get this funding and different support mechanisms around. If you have apprentices, there's different awards you can go in. It can help your reputation and the way that people look at you. And so it's all good can come from taking on people like apprentices. And the one at the bottom is an office. Now, say you were an organisation in town B and you were contracting for a contract in town A. Now, you could show that you were going to add value to town A by opening a local office in town A. So not only were you going to pay business rates to town A, but also you were going to employ some local people. And if you're contracting with a public sector body, they will love that, because that's helping their economy. You're not just working away at arm's length in a different part of the country and taking money away from that location. You're actually reinvesting it back in that location. So that's another great way of adding social value. But social value can be, there are no hard and fast rules with it. Be creative, think what you can add. So, it's just about adding something extra in. So that's just a few examples. So just as a quick recap, are you working efficiently? You want to make sure that your costs are as lean and mean as they can possibly be. Do you really understand your costs? Do you know what direct costs you have? Do you know what overheads you have? Be really clear on that and how you apportion those overheads, how you treat those costs. Do you understand your competition? Who's out there? What costs are they working to? What quality are they working to? And what is their reputation? What sort of levels of customer service do they have? And it's not to emulate that, but it's just to understand, because you need to be authentic and you need to be creative as a intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, and that's great. It's about forging your own path and having those baby steps to what you want in your dream, but you also need to keep half an eye on what other people are doing around you as well. Be understanding what your accounts say about you. It's not because you can change the figures, but you can certainly have influence over the narrative that goes into your accounts, because they say a lot about you. They say whether you've taken a loss on a contract. They say whether you're supporting a contract with the rest of your business. They say what your plans are for the future, whether you're looking to move out of an area or whether you're looking to merge or acquire or sell off bits of your business. And that could have an impact or influence over the contract and what you're wanting to take on. Making sure that the contract is in line with your mission. Now, that's really key, because we will have a core part of our business, and it's about, if you're wanting to go off in arm's length different directions, but it's about being really clear about why you're doing that. Is it good to support in the right way? Certain businesses have taken on, gone on deviations and then found that hasn't worked and had to withdraw and go back to core business. And sometimes it's best doing what rather than, trying to go into areas that you don't have the expertise in so well. So it's about just thinking about the direction of travel that you're wanting to go in and making sure the contracts that you take on actually are in line with that. And lastly, think about what value you add. People love extra value. So there's different ways. Just be creative with the value. Think of the dog and the stick. If you're paying for the dog, can you get the stick as well? So that would be great. What can you do to support? What can you offer over and above? Something to make people want to contract with you. And I suppose it comes up to now is having the confidence and the belief and the ability to take advantage of things as and when they come up. We might not think we're in the right place to go for a tender, but if there's an opportunity, why not now? The right time is often now. There is never a perfect time to do something. And sometimes we just have to go with the flow and, take these opportunities, because you might just look back, if you don't, and regret not having done that. So if something comes up and you feel in your gut feeling that it's in line with your mission, it feels right for you, you've got the skills and the finances and the backing and the experience and everything to go with it, then maybe your time is now to do it. Because after all, what you really want is collaborative working with a contract. They're getting something out of the contract. They're getting your added value. They're getting your goods or your service. And you're getting something too, it's helping you to be able to grow and to expand, get new skills, maybe reinvest more back into your business or back into your staff that are your best assets. So it's about getting that collaboration right as part of working as a contract, because you are working together. But please, please don't fall into the trap of being reliant on your host. And I have seen that happen too. Now, take this example, an ant, there's this fungus that grows and they breathe the spore in, and the spore starts then growing inside the ant, and it actually eats the ant from the inside out. And it almost takes over the brain function of the ant, and it gets the ant to crawl up a tree, where then the fungus grows out of its head or the back of its head. When it matures, it releases its spores into the environment, which then float down to the ground for another ant to breathe in. And all that is left of that ant is the shell. So don't let that happen to you with your contracts. Don't allow yourself to contract so heavily on one or two contracts. And I have seen this where a business 80-90% of their business comes from one contract. What happens if that commissioners pull that contract away from you? What is left of you? You've just got a shell left. Don't let that happen. Make sure you have a balanced portfolio of contracts or income streams coming in. Make sure your income sources are from more than one area, because that lowers your risk. You don't want to be open to be, in operation 1 minute and suddenly that's it, you're out of business the next. Now, it's a free gift from me, and to thank you for being on my webinar. You can download my free ebook today. It's not available on my website. It's just available for the time being. And it's about getting your organisation contract ready. So it's just a little bit more, just covering what we've done today, a little bit more detail. So download that, great read. There's some other documents and things on my resources available on my website, so have a look at that as well. Now, if you're looking for more information, obviously there's only so much information you can do in an hour. I have coaching programs. I've got a herd leader coaching program. I've got a herd essentials coaching program, and I'm also doing some bite-sized coaching programs. Now, none of these are available at the moment. I'm only launching them at certain times. But if you are interested in knowing more, then contact me at whyfollowtheherd@gmail.com, or go onto my website and fill in my contact form on there. And we can have some conversations about how we can support you. These are all online, so you can watch the videos at a time that will suit you. So that's your training bit. And then the coaching bit comes in, because not only do you get bonus videos, you get extra ones that aren't even shown on that list, but the bonuses, the extra bonuses, that you get group coaching calls. So it's about implementing that training into your business. Not only just talking that through with myself, but actually with other businesses. You get that conversation going online as well. So that's a really, really great way about thinking about how you can move your organization forward. It's a really, really powerful way. And most successful businesses and individuals have a coach and have somebody to support. It's having somebody to talk through, and that's an invaluable. You will find such a great return on investment from having that person there, like myself, to be able to coach you through different stages, not only the business side, but the confidence, the belief, dealing with change. All these sorts of things from one end of your business to another are really, really key. So please give me a contact at whyfollowtheherd@gmail.com, or go to my website and fill in my contact form and let me know. Now, if you've enjoyed this webinar, I have a Talk to the Expert series as well. These are a few of the ones that I've either had or got coming up. So next month, I've got an effective communication with NLP trainer Chris Menlove-Platt, and I've got some other things as well about projects and failing and how you avoid that, managing your finances, being a great leader. So I've got some great collaborative workshops, so webinars, so have a look out for those. And I also do webinars on my own as well. And there's a couple of selections there, goal setting techniques, and that was a really, really successful. You can see that on my YouTube channel. It's on my website. And business planning doesn't have to be boring. That's coming up as well really shortly. And just as we come to the end, I want to say thank you very much for joining me today. Check out some of my past webinars on my YouTube channel, which is Debbie Clement-Large. Check out Twitter and Periscope at whyfollowherd, and look at my Facebook page, which is Why Follow the Herd. And if you want to know more about what I do and my business, check out my website, which is whyfollowtheherd.com. It's been really, really nice having you as part of the webinar, and I hope to catch up with you a webinar again shortly. Take care.